That's everything for PFL versus Bellator. Now we hop right into UFC Mexico. We have two rematches at the top of the bill. Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega in the co-main event for 5 rounds, if we need it. And Brandon Royval versus Brandon Moreno, number 2. Brandon versus Brandon squared. UFC Mexico. Let's go. We first saw Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval square off in November of 2020, where Moreno would go on to win the fight with 1 second left in the very first round with a TKO on the ground. And while I'm not discrediting Moreno because it was a great fight for those 4 minutes and 59 seconds, very back and forth with Moreno getting the better of that first round, Royval did have an injury sustained to his shoulder where it looked like it had kind of pulled out of place, and then he kind of held his wrist at the same time. I can't remember the exact specification of what happened in the aftermath, but there was an injury on the Royval side, but still nonetheless an incredible performance from Moreno to get a victory in which would send him into his rivalry and quadrilogy with Deiveson Figueiredo for the flyweight championship of the world. We saw Moreno come out on the better side of that quadrilogy with 2 wins to 1 loss and 1 draw in their very first fight, which was one of the best flyweight fights of all time. Squeezed in between there is a victory over Kai Kara France as well. And then we saw in another title bout, Brandon Moreno lose last year to Alexandre Pantoja, who is still the current men's flyweight champion. And I say that he is still the flyweight champion because on the other side, he made his first title defense against Brandon Raw Dog Royval. That came in December at UFC 296, where Pantoja would get the nod on the judges' scorecards over the course of a great 25-minute fight. Prior to that, Royval had tallied off 3 straight victories, 2 of which came in the first round by finish. He beat Rogerio Bontorin, Matt Schnell, and Matheus Nicolau en route to getting his first UFC title shot, and now turning around in just over 2 months removed from his first ever title fight that we just discussed, he has the opportunity to right the wrong and get revenge against Moreno and earn himself a second crack at UFC Gold. This fight's going to be non-stop from bell to bell, assuming it does go 25 minutes. I'm not quite so sure it may, but these two guys are just built for this fight game. Moreno fighting in his home country of Mexico, used to training at elevation, as is Brandon Raw Dog Royval as well, for what it's worth. Now, not quite as high. I believe he's from the Denver camp, so the Mile High City at 5280. Moreno, and I believe where they are in Mexico City, is over 7,000 feet above sea level. We've seen these factors play a role in fights in the past, including Cain Velasquez losing his championship fight. So if you do not come to Mexico prepared to fight at elevation, you can drain, and you can drain very quickly. A lot of people, I've even seen this thrown around on Twitter for like people that bet on the sport and whatnot, people are throwing around when people have arrived in Mexico, how long they've been there to acclimate to the elements and to that high elevation with their cardio. So a lot of fighters have been there. I mean, there's a ton of Mexican talent on this card. Obviously, that's why the UFC is going there. But outside of that, a lot of fighters have been getting there at least 2 weeks out from the night that the fights occur on Saturday. So I anticipate with the way Raw Dog fights and with his elevation experience, we're going to have 2 guys that are fresh for 25 minutes. I mean, if you just go back to December, Royval went 25 minutes when Pantoja never tired, was in that fight till the very end. It was a very competitive back and forth fight. I expect much of the same here. If that 4 minutes and 59 seconds that we got in 2020 is any indication of what type of fight we could get with these 2 guys, us as fight fans are in for an absolute treat. These are 2 of the most active fighters at 125 pounds, 2 guys that at the age of 30 and age 31 that are right into their prime years or entering as of now their prime years, and I think this is the recipe for success, to have a barn burner of a fight. It is a fight where, it's 2 guys that are in the title picture. Do we really want to see them get right back into it? I mean, until proven otherwise, you got to earn your spot to be up here, and if these guys are holding their way in the top 5, then so be it. The winner of this is deserving of a title fight. The original booking was Moreno versus Albazi. Maybe they go ahead and put Albazi into the title fight. I believe the UFC is going to Brazil in May for UFC 301. We could maybe see Pantoja versus Albazi there. Then the winner of Moreno and Royval 2 can get the winner of Pantoja and Albazi. I think that makes a lot of sense if the UFC is looking to take a Brazilian champion to Brazil. We know Alex Pereira is booked for UFC 300. He has came out and said that if he doesn't take a lot of damage, he'll turn around on the 21 days and fight in Brazil as well. But that seems risky, and I don't know if anybody's coming out of that Hill and Pereira fight unscathed. So we'll see come April 13th. But for the time being, that's the picture right now, if you ask me, at 125 pounds. So the winner here has a lot on the line, and the loser probably doesn't take that much of a back step. However, there are other guys in this division that are trying to climb, such as Mohamed Mohayev, such as Manel Kopp. So we will see who will hold their spot and who may not Saturday night at UFC Mexico. And much like the main event, not only are we going to get a 5-rounder in the co-main event slot, but it is another rematch, this time at a 145-pound bout between Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega. We saw these two square off in July of 2022 at UFC Long Island, which was also an ABC Fight Night card. And compared to the main event that we're getting between Moreno and Royval, there's also another similarity here in the fact that there was some sort of arm/shoulder injury. Now, this one was much more prevalent and prominent than that of which we saw in the flyweights first fight. In this one, Brian Ortega completely faltered, gave up in the fight. I think he separated his shoulder, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's even had to have a surgery or two during his layoff. So this is Ortega's first fight back since July of 2022. Whereas on the other side, in the red corner, Yair Rodriguez has fought 2 other times. He became the interim champion of the world and has experience fighting one of the best in the world in Alexander Volkanovski, which happened in July of 2023. And again, I love the similarities between these two fights because this one was also shaping up to be a very good 25-minute main event. For the 4 minutes and 11 seconds that we got, it was very entertaining. It felt very high level. Both guys were landing shots. Brian Ortega had control of the clinch game. Yair was landing some good shots at range. But surprisingly, Ortega was holding up pretty well to his own right in the striking. He landed some good shots. He cut Yair, I believe it was underneath of his right eye early on into that round. So if we can just pick up where we left off, I think we're in store for another great fight in this weekend's co-main event. I think it's worth mentioning that coming in, Yair is a minus 155 favorite. On the comeback is Brian Ortega at plus 130. I don't think that those numbers are based upon the result of their first fight, to be quite honest with you. I think it is based on, one, Brian Ortega's 1.5 long layoff, over a 1.5 as a matter of fact, closing in on closer to 2 years than a 1.5 at this point, I suppose. And for Yair, the second reason is he's fought 2 times since then. He became the champion. He had a great finish over Josh Emmett. He went tit for tat with Alexander Volkanovski until getting finished in the 3rd round of their title fight last July. But if you just look at the 4 minutes that we got in their first fight, this is a dead even pick'em. And I think this is a very hard fight to have a side to bet on, if I'm being honest with you. I don't like wagering when I see inactivity from guys. You pair that with coming back against someone who's gotten an interim championship since you have last fought in Brian T. City Ortega. He's great with his jiu-jitsu, but can he get Yair down there and have success? That remains to be seen, because in that first fight, he did not. He controlled the clinch, but couldn't get Yair down. And on the flip side, if you're on the side of Yair, look at that fight. Look at how Ortega was having success on the feet. And on paper, this is how Yair's path to victory should be come this weekend, but it may not come as easy as he may hope and what some people may think. I think this is a great fight. It'll be interesting to see how Ortega looks. Will there be ring rust after this long of a layoff, after surgery, after injuries? And Yair, yes, having fought last year 2 times since their first fight, he still has had a relatively lengthy layoff. I guess we would be going on around 8 months or so, give or take, since that fight with Volkanovski. So we'll see how he's gotten in his time off, what improvements he has made. But I think if I had to pick, I would lean Yair solely for the fact that over the course of 25 minutes, I think his striking will play out more beneficial than what Brian Ortega's would. But if Brian can get the fight to the ground, I meant to say down to the ground, mixed it up, you get the point. If he gets it down to the ground, can Yair get up? Or will Ortega use his world-class jiu-jitsu to get another UFC submission win, and after this long layoff, launch himself right back into the title mix at 145, which is very, very fresh right now. In our most recent episode talking about UFC 298 and Ilia Toporia's victory, I posed that there are essentially 5 options for his first title defense, and one of those options is the winner of Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega 2. So be sure to tune in this weekend. UFC Mexico goes down Saturday night. It's a big, big Saturday in the world of mixed martial arts. PFL versus Bellator and UFC Mexico in the evening. It's going to be a great day. So let me know in the comments below, what card are you looking forward to most? PFL versus Bellator on Saturday afternoon, or UFC Mexico with the 2 rematches headlining in the evening? And give me your predictions for those 2 5-round bouts. Will Moreno go 2-0 against Royval? Will Yair Rodriguez go 2-0 against Ortega? Or the 2 men that lost their first go-around get revenge on Saturday night and put themselves closer to a title shot in their respective divisions? If you enjoyed this preview, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss breakdowns and such as these, talking storylines and what goes into these fights and what is on the line. I also recap all of the most meaningful results from every mixed martial arts card, alongside with giving my thoughts and opinions on breaking MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community, follow along on social media at the BAJ MMA, and follow on your favorite audio listening platform if you want one long-form podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many, many more. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and I'll catch you for the recap